The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is charged with the idea of taking the lessons from the past and transferring them to our future.
As stewards of history in the Birmingham movement, the BCRI houses incredible collections that show and document where the community has come from and how the Birmingham movement both came to be and was so successful.
For more than 25 years, the Institute has educated people about what happened here in the 60s, not just in Birmingham, but across our country. Civil rights and equality challenged today just as they were many decades ago. We are here to enlighten each generation about civil and human rights by exploring our common past and working together in the present to build a better future.
Through many educational offerings, we teach the idea that the changes in Birmingham, Alabama were not just because of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. A lot of these changes took place because of the youth in this city. And due to that, we have a mission to share with the youth of today what youth in their generations in the past have done. Through our Legacy Youth Leadership Program, we bring high school students from all over the Jefferson County area here to study this narrative and to serve as docents and ambassadors to the Civil Rights Institute. We have BCAP, which is the Birmingham Cultural Alliance Project, where we visit middle school students and we take them through this history and through this narrative so that they can prepare to understand their role in society. We have outreach programs that visit many schools and institutions to highlight the story of accomplishment, the story of overcoming, the story of a power and the movement that people in Birmingham were able to bring to bear to change not only the city, but the state, the nation, and the world.
By making it accessible to researchers and local students from middle, high, and university students, they're able to come in and see where we've been so that they can go and be better stewards of Birmingham and our present and then our future.
Thank you for joining us for this engaging virtual conversation series. We invite you to help us continue the work for civil rights through racial justice by becoming a member or donating to our work. You can find us on our social media platforms to stay connected with us. Thanks again for your support.
Good afternoon. Welcome to yet another presentation in our Black History Month virtual series. As we are examining the representation of Black families through film, I am so excited to join you all here on Facebook and YouTube. And I hope that you'll take part in our presentation with us today by leaving us your comments and asking us questions in the comment section. So, positive representation of Black people has always proven to be impactful through the years. Recently, HBO Max aired the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion. It was a wonderful reminder of the excellence of and portrayal of Black families on television screens through the years. Indulging this taste of nostalgia was enough for me to reflect on the influence and impact that Black representation had on my life growing up in the 80s and 90s. And my mom was an avid supporter of Black culture. My whole life was surrounded by books and films and shows that featured positive representations of African Americans. I've always loved the imaginings of a great story, especially a Black one. And so I've also been excited and in preparing for this presentation as we've got so much great Black talent joining us in this panel to discuss today. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce to you all someone who I'm sure you all already know, Adrienne Hopper Williams. She's the president of Enlight Productions and an Emmy and Gracie award-winning television producer. Now, she's been making great entertainment for 25 years and doesn't at all look like it. She's got numerous award-winning talk shows and documentaries and docuseries. You've seen her on a lot of very familiar networks, and she's partnered with faith-based productions for shows like Exalted and syndicated the TD Jakes talk show. So welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration and in the representation that you see in TV and film. Is there anything in particular
Right
that
now,
strongly
in
inspired
television
you?
and film, I just have to say everything that Oprah Winfrey is doing right now personally inspires me. My history has been in journalism, and so I followed her career, and I've just really been inspired by her move to go from a talk show host to being an owner of a network, and the spirit behind her programming that's always been about inspiring, educating, uplifting, and enlightening people. So she's really been kind of my inspiration.
Most definitely, I have to agree with you there. In addition, on our panel today, we have the very talented Vernon Banks. He's best known as the diligent medical intern, Vernon, on the critically acclaimed HBO comedy Getting On, which I absolutely love. He's also appeared on NBC's ER, Married on FX, ABC Family's Mystery Girls, and Ground Floor. He is a San Francisco Bay Area native, and he is here to join us as well today. So welcome, Burton.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hello.
We're so happy to have
I kind
you.
of lost the feed, but thank you very much thank you for having me. It is a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Tell us about, in terms of representation in TV and film, where you find your inspiration.
Well, right now, I'm just really enjoying everything that Issa Rae is doing. And if you're watching all of her online content as well, in conjunction with Insecure, but also Black Lady sketch show with Robin Thede also, and across the board, there's just a lot of like really inspiring work coming out that's showing multiple facets of Black families, Black life, everything.
Yes, I love Issa. And even more than the show, the talks after the show are so captivating and they're inspiring too. And last but not least, of course, we want to bring on Mr. Christopher Campbell, who's a Birmingham native. You might recognize him as Officer Mailer from that A24 dark comedy, The Death of Dick Long. And they also did a really awesome reading this Black History Month as part of Sundance, and the benefits of which came here to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. So we're very thankful for that. He has also portrayed a lot of very familiar characters, real life people from Black history, from Tuxedo Junction to Dreamgirls, The Color Purple, Green Book. Chris has been bringing Black history to the stage for many years, and we're so lucky to have him here with us today. Hi, Chris.
Hello, hello. How's everyone? So happy to be here today.
Tell us a little bit about what's inspiring you nowadays when it comes to Black TV and film.
Wow. So really what is inspiring me right now is how Hollywood sort of now is allowing Black folk to be at the helm or to star in the more horror and suspenseful films. That hasn't always been a thing. So anytime I see a horror flick that's starring Black people, it's inspiring to me. So I love that.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good answer. It's not one we hear often either, especially as you speak with young folks. So that's a very good point to make. So I want to talk to you guys first today a little bit about stereotypes. Black characters often played by Black people weren't often played by Black people in the early days of Hollywood. Of course, they were barely portrayed at all, but when they were, it was usually a caricature played by a white actor in blackface. But as Hollywood has featured more Black characters and cast more Black actors, they've emphasized some other stereotypes. So how do you think these stereotypes of scary Black men and sassy Black women have been used to alter Black family relations?
Well, for me, we know that racial stereotypes, they're kind of constructed beliefs that all members of the same race have the same characteristics. Typically, these characteristics or these beliefs are negative. And I mean, stereotypes are nothing but they're cognitive structures of what people think things are. So I just feel like you spoke about the sassy Black woman, is that right? The sassy Black woman,
Right.
and that's something that we've seen since the beginning of time. Um, and it looks like it's not going anywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Would you agree with that, Verdon?
Yes. There is something about also the work of it, of trying to fix the stereotypes in a way. I'm trying to think about how a person would go about that. Like, and I think it comes down to power and making sure that we are represented not only on screen but off screen in all the positions that are held, from studio executives to network executives. Those are important. Those decision makers.
Definitely. And the anti-Blackness at this point, it's become pervasive. Back in the 1830s, racist portrayals of Black folks were popularized by the American entertainment scene, and with the media portraying people of color in compromising ways for so many years, it's been pretty difficult to tell the difference between culture and stereotype. So I want to ask y'all today, how do we overcome these anti-Black stereotypes when so much time and energy has been put into creating and reinforcing and upholding these racist stereotypes?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, we really support the films and the television shows that are out there that are trying to show a more diverse depiction of African American life. I know that there are a lot more stories that need to be told. We are not just one type of people. It's not monolithic. And we just have to support the projects that are out there that show more diverse representation, But then also we need to create programming that shows that various different types of depictions of Black people and lives that we're not seeing. For example, Blackish is wonderful, and it has shown, it has really hit the issues head on, whether it's
Oh yeah.
racism, Trump. They haven't been afraid to really dig in there. But there are other types of Black families that we're not seeing. They're interracial Black families that we're not really seeing those stories. And there are healthy single parent families. It doesn't have to always be the traditional nuclear family that's doing, the healthy shows.
Oh yeah.
Oftentimes we'll see a single parent family in a show that is just, depicting nothing but unhealthiness. So, it's up to us to create them, and it's up to us to also support the projects when they do come out, because they often will be short-lived. The ones that are going against the stereotypes, because
Right.
quiet as kept, there has been a power that be. We learned a lot from this last election, and the numbers of people that are clearly in support of keeping the image of Black people as oppressed, as depressed, and just struggling, and
Right.
want to keep that image out there, as opposed to the image of those of us who are succeeding and living healthy lives and having healthy relationships. And we're seeing more and more of that happening, I have to say, after George Floyd and the
Yes.
movement and Black Lives Matter and all the protests that we saw around the world. Hollywood is listening. Some people will be like, oh, the door is probably going to close really quickly, so you better
Yeah,
take
there's been
advantage. But
concern with that.
I honestly believe that there are some more concrete changes that are really happening. People are listening. They're looking at how diverse programming is, and even shows from the past. When I watch things with my kids now, they are actually letting you know if there's some derogatory messaging now.
Right.
That's a
And
big
anything
deal.
triggering.
It's a big deal. So I do think that there is hope on the horizon.
I want to
So
jump on there as well, because I think
yeah.
there is definitely hope on the horizon. I completely agree with you. I recently had the wonderful experience of working on the Fox show 911, starring Angela Bassett, and her family is very interesting on the show. She is in an interracial relationship now, and her ex-husband is identifies as LGBTQ, played by Rockman Dunbar on the show, and he now has a partner as well. But then also on the show is also a lesbian couple played by Aisha Hines and Tracy Toms, and I think that's amazing. And I came on the show. I ended up having a husband on the show as well, and we are a Black couple,
Yes.
LGBTQ, on prime
Right.
time on a show that has 3 versions of LGBTQ Black families relationships, which
Right.
in one show. And so the representation is slowly but surely coming there. We just have to keep pushing, continue
Yeah.
pushing. Everybody needs to get their work out.
Well, since the 1600s, interracial sexualities represented unfortunate sentiments for Black women. And for that matter, Black men who were engaged with white women were severely punished. However, white men who exploited Black women were never reprimanded. And in contemporary times, we've got interracial relationships that sometimes represent rejection for Black women. The probability of finding a quote good Black man is often portrayed as low because of the prevalence of homicide, drugs, incarceration, and often interracial relationships depict this major task for Black women that's so difficult. So, what do y'all think that representations of Black love are more important because they represent more than the aesthetic, but also solidarity. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm just going to say that I believe in love, and I believe that where you can find it, you need to grab it and hold on tight and take care of it. So
Yes.
I understand the layers of complication that must go into having an interracial relationship. And so, you know, while you're like, yay, let's celebrate love, it's complicated. I also understand wanting to celebrate Black love because of all that has happened to our people with the concentrated effort to try to separate and break down the Black family, right? So you kind of want to push back and go, no, we're going to be strong and we're going to stay together. But at the end of the day, you know, there's always that war between, you know, are we for humanity and love and all those greater things? Are we, you know, going to stop and go, hey, okay, we need to focus on ourselves and just only be with ourselves. And I think that the where we are right now in this new era really is about both and. Like, we need to celebrate Black love, and we need to celebrate the other types of relationships, but including Black people that may be, you know, interracial or other gendered. So I just think that we're just in a different place for me, and I feel like, again, I don't want to see so many of my friends going without relationships because they are stuck on, I can only be with a Black man.
Right.
The Black man is my first choice. That's what I married. And I'm grateful that I have the husband that I have. But, you know, there's love to be had out there. And I think that it's important that be the focus.
Oh, yeah.
I also feel like that is another example of how stereotypes have slowly changed over the years. If we think back to television and film years and years ago, if there was an interracial relationship, that was just a no-no. That was not going to happen. The father wasn't having it. It just wasn't going to happen. Then it slowly changed into it being kind of like the punchline. You know, somebody shows up with someone of the opposite of a different race, and it's kind of, you know, like, whoa, this white person or whatever in the room, it became funny. Now it's becoming more of a accepted thing. It's more like, okay, well, you know, you're part of the family. You know, I love you. So I feel like the stereotypes have changed also in regards to that relationship and how we see relationships on TV and film also.
Well, let me ask you, Chris, as we're talking about the representation of the family and how we receive things based on what the media and what society has decided is true and correct for us. So Hollywood will often have you believe that often Black fathers are estranged or otherwise absent from the parenting dynamic. But in 2013, the CDC released a report that said that Black fathers are more likely to have bathed, dressed, or helped their children go to the restroom every day than white fathers. So, what do you think are the ways that film and television representations of Black families have influenced parenting in the Black community?
So that's a great question. It definitely has influenced parenting. But again, that is it. These are not isolated incidents. You know, you can't really say that this television show or this film is raising your child. That is strictly up to the parent, and it's typically how that parent was raised. Because like we mentioned, we had another film discussion last night, and they seem to be domino effects. How this person was raised is how they raise their child, and so on and so forth. So I feel like TV and film does, to a certain extent, it does affect parents to a certain extent, but overall, it really just depends on how that mother or father was raised in their own household.
I have to say, I love the, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I love the animated short on the Black father that was doing his daughter's hair. I believe it was called Hair Love.
Yes, it's so great. Everyone go see Hair Love.
Yes, that was so refreshing to see a relationship between a father and his daughter be so intimate, doing the things that typically you'd only see a mother doing. And I'm here to tell you, with a 3-year-old daughter, that hair ministry is real. And so kudos to all the dads out there that are spending the time on the hair.
Oh yeah.
But I agree. It's so important to be able to see that in the media, because yes, when Black fathers see other fathers, being present,
Yeah.
it's something that's encouraging. It's like, as opposed to just the typical absent dad, or the guy that got in trouble that's now in prison that they have to go visit, or that's just, on the street. I mean, there's just so many of those roles that we have seen over time, that the pimp, nothing negative against Empire, but I just want to see more than that same story.
More conflict resolution
Yes, more conflict
behind these
resolution.
familiar conflicts.
Right. Different types of characters too.
I appreciate that segue too, because the next point I was going to make is that the media overrepresents the link between Black families and criminality, and they underrepresent it for white families. You can even argue that depictions of African Americans and Blackness in the media contributes to the negative perceptions and mistreatment of African American groups, which really aren't strictly limited to the police, but reflective of the entire criminal justice system. So do you think that the oppression and inequalities in today's criminal justice system can be traced to the stereotypes detailed in film and television?
Absolutely.
There was a study done by UCLA on this in particular, looking at violence in the media, and tracing how children who watch it interact with each other versus those that don't. There's a direct correlation between what we're seeing in the media and how we are then treated, because it just sears it in the brain of people who are watching the image over and over again.
That's right.
It's probably going to be a Black person, who they're looking for, who committed that crime. Well, why do you always think that? That's what we're always seeing.
Right.
So it's a
Well,
problem.
let me ask you, actors. I mean, we've got the Anti-Defamation League. They intervene in situations where Jewish people are slandered or discriminated against, or whenever the audience is made to be ignorant to the Holocaust or there's anti-Semitism. Do we have an organization that's there created just to protect our image, just to challenge anti-Black stereotypes and observe how Black people are being represented in the media?
Well, I do believe that the NAACP often addresses where things are very large and we can't help but take notice. But in terms of day to day, I don't feel that there is someone out there looking out for us in that particular way. There are many times I get auditions for things, and I read it, and I'm like, oh, of course, this person is a criminal.
Right.
This and this and that in it, and it's always a shock when it is not the case.
Yeah.
And what do you
I
think?
think one of my I think to one of my favorite scenes in Introducing Dorothy Dandridge, where she's afraid to play Carmen because she's afraid that everyone will play against her and she won't ever be cast again, and the Black community won't accept her and the white community already doesn't, and it's already a very difficult time. She was breaking boundaries for Black actresses. And I feel like we still have situations like that today, where Taraji P. Henson has to be afraid to play yet another angry Black woman. So,
but to your point, though, I do want to say, I think that there are people working in their silos to this effort. I mean, obviously, the work that Ava DuVernay is doing, there are many out there that are not just creating important work, but are also putting pressures on the powers that be to make sure that they are more inclusive. I know that she has had a big voice over at Netflix, and really everywhere that she's gone. She's a powerhouse, and I'm so grateful for what she's done. But there are others that are working in silos. But there should be that organizing body that everyone like you guys would know to go to say, hey, I ran into this issue.
And it's not good.
It's not good, and we need to put pressure, on the community. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really good point.
There are definitely moments when I'll read something. I was like, was there not one other Black person in the room to like to say something that this? No, you can't have that. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens so much. And it's been argued that, well, it's just true. A lot of oppressed groups take on the ideas and beliefs of their oppressor. So do you think that certain behaviors in Black families are more or less accepted because they've been sensationalized in the media?
What specific types of behaviors?
Well, we have the misrepresentation of being on welfare, being poor. It's been so overly racialized, poverty. And so, as we are working our way through this pandemic and people are losing their jobs, it is time to set aside pride. And for some families, they use the excuse that they don't want to be just like another family on TV. I can make it on my own. And for that same fact, we are just overrepresented as poor in media. You can see here with this study from Color of Change and Family Story that 59% of the poor African Americans in America are, or rather, the media is representing a 59% poor Black African America and just 29% poor everybody else.
We have a ways to go on that still. And I do agree that, you go, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Did we watch these images of ourselves and then, say, I should emulate that? Or is the media, well, let me correct that. The reality is this. We all know that there have been a lot of folks in entertainment historically that have not I think that the important thing is that we just try to change the narrative on that.
It's on us.
It's on us.
As
Okay.
far as the misrepresentation goes, one of my favorite sitcoms of all times is A Different World. And I'll never forget Debbie Allen talking about when she came onto that project or Bill Cosby asking her to come to the project. Season 1, they had white writers, they had white directors, and it does not give you the essence of Black college life. It did not give you the essence of an HBCU. And being HBCU, I went for an HBCU for 2 years. You could definitely tell the difference when Debbie Allen came onto the scene, and the writers became Black. So the misrepresentation was definitely there because they don't know what we experienced. They don't know how it was. So as far as getting the point across, you need us to get the point across. We have to get the point across because we lived it.
That's right. Yeah. So let's take it back just a little ways.
Hey now.
Good Times was the first Black two-parent family sitcom on television. And the show addressed serious topics that highlighted struggles with which Black families of the time could relate. And while the portrayal of Black life on Good Times was just one perspective, the producers, who were mostly white, wanted to keep the narrative of the Black struggle going. And so the media often, like I mentioned, we find they racialize poverty today by presenting a distorted image of Black families. So what are some of the other common ways that you see Hollywood misrepresenting Black families today?
Well, like Adrian mentioned, there's so many different kinds of Black families that are not represented in the media. Um, all the different kinds of families are not represented. So once we delve deeper into that and the happy single families that she mentioned earlier and do the interracial families, there are so many other ways we can do or that we can reach people. So many different ways that we haven't reached yet.
And the reality is we have moments of it. We have a season, an episode here. I mean, not just an episode, a series here, a series there. That's hitting it because we're behind the cameras as well as in front of the cameras. We're helping to drive that narrative. We're helping to, we're in the producer's seat. We're in the director's seats. So, is there a misrepresentation? Absolutely. Those percentages that you just laid out there, that's devastating, and it's obviously not a true depiction of where we are. As far as what we do about it, I'm grateful for the Black issues, like I said, out there, and the Grownish and all of those others. But there's so many more stories. There's so many subcultures of Black life. When you say Black people and Black families, like, we could sit here forever and list the different subcultures. Yeah. Every region in this country, the Black folks there are different. They have, slightly different values. They talk a little different. They walk a little different. And we need to see that, because the more that we understand how diverse we are within our own culture, and all of us, whether you're Asian, whether we know all the diversity of white folks because we've been seeing those stories over time, but we need to see it now. Now is the time that we see it more in our culture and other cultures, that we're not just this one stereotype. We as Black people, quite honestly, are further along than the other races, and getting more diversity in our stories, honestly.
Yes.
So we need to keep
and you're
it
definitely
going.
right.
We need to keep
There's
it going.
So many. The first thing people normally say to me, a Black vegetarian living in Alabama, is that Black people aren't vegetarians. And I'm like, really? Have you met any Black people from Massachusetts or California or Washington or even Texas? Because there are other Black vegetarians. It's not something that you specifically can't be a vegetarian just because you're Black, but you just don't see that represented in film, and it can change how you see yourself and how you raise your kids and how you love your family. It's flat out unfair.
And so we don't have to have the stories that are always such high trauma stories, right? Because there's this idea that if you're African American, you certainly were born in trauma and lived through tons of trauma, and as a result, now this is who you are. And the truth of the matter is, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm really grateful, I didn't have a ton of trauma as a childhood, in my childhood, and as a result, it's provided me a different kind of lifestyle. Well, that lifestyle needs to be seen too. It doesn't have to always be, someone was shot and killed and someone went to prison and this big thing. But just like This Is Us, normal people problems.
Yes.
I shouldn't say normal we are. People, but I'm saying problems that don't have to be so rooted in a high level of trauma, because we need to see that and there's another life that's possible too. It doesn't have to look like this. I remember thinking, and I had a talk with my father when I was at UCLA and said, I don't think I'm going to be able to be successful because I don't have the story of this heavy trauma. And every person that I see that's Black that has a success story had a story that started with this heavy trauma story. So that I don't know that it's going to be possible for me. I thought that these two things were inextricably linked, believe it or not.
Right. Wow.
And so it's like, he just had to correct me on that immediately.
It's expected that you're going to have a story to tell.
Exactly. I mean,
or negatively.
And we all have a story to tell, but it doesn't have to look like the poverty story, like you were saying.
Right.
That we all think that has to be the story that we're coming out of in order to do something great.
Well, I definitely believe that there are a lot of different stories that are out there, but it's about them getting approved to the point that they will actually make it on air. Like, because I read a lot of different scripts from writer friends and just scripts that are being pitched to networks and studios, and a lot of the times, a lot of these things are passed upon, and and my thoughts are that it doesn't fit under a category of how they see Black families and Black life.
Yeah.
I heard my husband in a panel earlier today with Lifetime talking about this exact same thing, and him saying, you know, we have to have people in position at the networks that understand these different types of Black life as well. And so if you don't have the person that's greenlighting it, you can have the
They're the
idea
decision
all day,
makers.
but it'll never get on the air. So just, you know, important that we move ourselves and go down that road of being the gatekeeper and being a green lighter. Such a powerful position for people of color to be able to say, yes, we need those stories that we don't normally see. And just because it doesn't make up, you know, 90% of Black people aren't vegan or vegetarian doesn't mean that we shouldn't do a show starring someone with those characteristics.
Yes.
And that it won't be successful because most Black people aren't that way. It's like some people think that simplistically, but if we have more people in position to be able to greenlight those shows and see them as important, I think that will help a great deal.
So it's impossible to have this conversation without looking at one major issue that exists across the board, not just in Black films and television, but that's the representation of women. And I'm very eager to hear what you, Chris and Burton, have to say to this, because we don't often give men the stage to speak on how they view representations of women. And specifically, I want to look at Spike Lee. His production company, 40 Acres and a Mule Filmworks, has made more than 35 films since 1983. And he's been criticized for his representation of women. And for example, Rosie Perez, who was acting in a role for the first time as Tina in Do the Right Thing, later said that she was really uncomfortable doing the nude scene in the movie. And then Bell Hooks later said that he wrote Black women in the same objectifying way that white filmmakers do. So do you think that Black filmmakers on the whole or overall are perpetuating anti-Black negative stereotypes of women?
I believe that Black women are completely absent from film and TV as like the whole spectrum. It actually absolutely infuriates me the number of times that in breakdowns I never even see like one single role that lists like Black woman. Like, you just don't ever really see that. And then when you watch TV, they're very few and far between. There's All Rise with Simone Missick. There is Issa Rae's Black Lady sketch comedy show. I'm straight in now. Just like Angela Bassett on 911. They built the show around her. That show was built around her character.
So in instances where the writers, the decision makers, and the creators aren't Black women, how often are we seeing Black women well supported with positive stories being told?
Not at all.
No.
It's like, which is, again, I'm going to use my word, infuriating. Black women saved this country. This last election, Black women always come through and save us, and no one is ever really looking out for them. And it hurts my heart to even have to say that. Everything that I'm writing and producing stars Black women forward content, because it's absolutely missing.
And it's just not fair.
You know, it is not fair. It's totally not fair. You know, I feel like we jumped into this world of reality TV. Everything is reality TV now, and Black women are not even shown in a positive light on reality TV, and that's supposed to be their lives, quote unquote. It's very disheartening. Yeah, it's infuriating. Like Vernon said, it really is.
As a producer, Adrian, do you find it's difficult? I know you said you need someone, a decision maker, to understand the story that you're trying to present to the world. So, how often do you find it's surprisingly not that difficult for them to hear you when you say, "Listen to me, I know what I'm talking about"?
I would say more recently, I have heard. I've felt that I've been more heard more recently, and I think it's really related to the latest protests that stem from George Floyd and everyone who kind of stopped and had to take a look at themselves and go, what are we doing as an organization, and how are we contributing to the problem, and how can we shift? And so I'm starting to, at least people I feel are listening more. I'm starting to see action. People are getting more. You're seeing more Black women being put into those positions of power. And so that's why I say I do feel that hope is on the horizon. I can't say that I've always felt like my goal has often surrounded around transformational programming, that which is not always the most popular thing. Right now, I feel like people are trying to look at stories that are more hopeful. For a long time, it was this pessimistic thing. But I feel like now folks really are becoming more woke, and they are trying to hear more about women's stories, or at least have us at the table. They're baby steps, and I'm celebrating every one of them. And I'm hoping that this is not a situation like after civil rights, where the door closed like after
Right.
a few years, but that there are going to be some real lasting changes, in the future.
Well, before we go today, I want to talk about some positive changes, because it's really clear that we've come a long way while we may still have a long way to go. And I was born in the 80s, and so my palette for Black representation on TV shows up in my life to this day. I was privileged enough to grow up in an era when on-screen expression of Black families and Black lives, it was far past the motif of Black struggle, which was what was predominant, in the 70s and shows like Good Times. So, do you guys see any indications of in the behavior of the Gen Z generation that might be caused by improved representation of African Americans in the media?
I was born in '82, so I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. Everything we saw, that we watched the same stuff, the same stuff.
We definitely had something to compare it to. We saw what was live on prime time, but we also had the older shows, and so we could see the differences in how things were getting better. And I have to wonder if maybe that's not influencing the young folks of today to see an even bigger difference now, where LGBTQ plus families are being celebrated or at least represented outside of a struggle. Do you see that on the set at all?
Yes, it's beginning to change, and but it's also uh, allowing people to kind of, when you see that representation, you feel not alone in the world. There is something about, something that heavily influenced me was A Different World, and about seeing people that look like me going to college.
At all.
Yeah, it was just it was amazing, and it makes my heart sing. And even something, there was a, what is it, the Jeffersons? That's another major one, because he was a business owner. They lived in this fancy apartment. They even had a maid. Oh my God, I
Yeah.
still a maid.
I question all the time what would have happened if they tried to cast a white maid
I
I
in that
wonder
show.
That
too.
would have
I
never
wonder.
happened.
I don't think that would have happened.
I mean,
But it's
so
an interesting thought.
It
I
is.
mean, Maybe they could consider that, even when they
may not have a
did the live studio production. So, with the creation of the Blade reboot, the Vampire Slayer, Stacey Osaka Fur is going to be Marvel's first Black female writer. And Mahershala Ali, who's going to star in the film, is reportedly directly involved with the studio's decision to hire their first Black female writer. Do y'all think that this type of advocacy is becoming a trend in Hollywood?
I hope it's a trend that stays, because
Yeah.
you have to open the door and pull other people with you before someone tries to close it shut. You need to open that
Right.
door, pull 4 more people in.
Another example of that kind of helping others up by a Black male is with David Oyelowo, who helped with Ava DuVernay with Selma, and being able to capture that role as director, and that was a part of her big launch. So, yes, it's a trend. I hope that it continues, and I'm so grateful for him for doing that.
Same here. I want to see more of it. I'm happy to see us filming more in Atlanta, in Georgia as a whole, and I'm excited to see us filming more here in Alabama. And it's a beautiful thing. I think the more that the industry moves to the Deep South, the more we'll see some of the really amazing talent that's down here finally getting a chance to take part and grow and flourish, and some new great talent coming out. So you guys, C.R. Capers, she's the founder and CEO of Harlem Film House. She says that Black film has always been a barometer of how we see ourselves. So what do you say to the statement that all stereotypes are based in some form of truth?
Yeah.
It's
I
an
agree.
it's an exaggerated, like, to
Yeah.
a degree, and it may have just been that.
I don't know. I think that, yes, you could probably say that for a lot of things, but I just feel like there was a very concerted effort to depict us in a certain way, and the whole brainwashing that happened to Black people with how the roles were chosen as to what we would do. They weren't trying to show a Frederick Douglass type person, in stories. And so, do all Black people eat watermelon? Do all Black people? I mean, you could go down the list of the silly stereotypes: the angry Black woman, the sassy Black woman, and the scary Black man, right? These are things that I feel like they're in a lot of ways manufactured, and then we start to believe that about ourselves.
Yeah.
We start to take on those beliefs about ourselves, of having lower worthiness and value, and we then hear these stereotypes and start to emulate them and perpetuate them in the myth that that's how we are. But I have a feeling like, yes, while some may be rooted in some truths, there are also some that have been manufactured for the demise of our people. Just gonna say it.
A question that pops in my head along with that is all representation good representation? And I think about it all the time. Is it better to be slightly present than not be present at all? And sometimes I watch certain things that I'm like, they should have just left us out. But then sometimes I'm like, we needed that one person in there for people to know that we live, that we exist in this space.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I see sci-fi and I see a Black person in it, even if they're like in the background, I get excited because that reminds people that we are the future. Like, that we don't end before that time comes.
Which is why I'm so excited when I see a horror film or a fictional movie that is Black cast. I mean, when I saw Gabrielle Union in her movie, that's not typical black person role. It's not. The black person plays best friend or
Oh yeah.
whatever. It doesn't. She doesn't play the heroine of that type of film. So anytime I see something like that, it's great. And it didn't have anything to do with slavery or
Yes.
anything like that.
Chris, when I saw Lovecraft Country, I immediately
Right.
thought about you. I was like, oh,
Right.
he is going to love this. Not only
Yep.
do we have it set in the 60s and actual elements of the civil rights movement being shown as part of the content, but we have a heroine, a woman taking care of business and saving everybody. And we have a Black family that is not made up of the usual nuclear Black family, mom, dad, siblings. We have an interesting love story that doesn't show her as a Jezebel or as a victim. I'm just going to recommend everybody over the age of 18 check out Lovecraft Country.
Yes, I agree. I
It's
concur.
a little gory.
There's a sci-fi element to it, sci-fi
Yeah.
horror. It has everything.
My head was spinning.
It's
Not only are there monsters and villains and witches and wizards and vampires and ghosts, but there's also white men burning crosses outside and police officers hanging people. It's just, and then they go to Korea during the Korean War, and they bring so much in, and it's representation that you don't grow up at my age used to see that. You're just not used to seeing anything like that. Was there anything in it that you guys wanted to share with our audience before we close today?
keep supporting Black film, TV projects, whatever you see it. Buy
That's
it, watch it, tell your friends about it.
Don't pirate it.
Don't pirate it. Word of mouth helps a lot. So help these
And
projects
post.
because networks and studios really pay attention to all these things, the tweets and Instagram, they pay attention to all that stuff. And if our stuff doesn't do well, we don't get a second chance. That's just
the truth.
That's the truth. So go out there and support.
I agree. Use your voice. With social media, there's a lot that people are reporting negative about it, but the positive about it is, you have your own audience, however big or small that is, and so you have a voice to say, hey, people, we think this is important to watch. This is a part of the diversity and the answer that we've been talking about for our future. So let's get behind it and be about our words and support. So I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And to actors, audition. Do not be afraid to audition. Show up,
That's
show out,
right.
because we need more of us on the TV and the film screen. So show up and audition.
Well, before we go, I want to definitely recognize some other shows as we close. And this is a list of honorable mentions. All of these Black shows and more are where I see myself and many others in life. And these shows are at the intersection of hope and sometimes reality. The lives of Black people in TV remind me that Black books, Black films, Black music, Black art, Black TV, Black plays, Black lives matter and representation matters. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for this presentation. If you are excited about what you saw, feel free to share. Our educational programs are all the virtual education programs are available on Facebook and YouTube in perpetuity. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.